recording. So we are so glad to be together with Dr. Shepherd and Dr. tonight and in our combined classes. And so hopefully with this combined effort, this will help us be able to sort of move forward. You all have done a great job on your APSLs. We're so proud of you for all that. There's a few of you who still need a few things turned in from the APSL, so just make sure you get all that wrapped up this week. So that that's out of your way and you're free and clear to move on with your APTEL. So we were ready to move on with that. So Dr. Shepherd, Dr. Crawford, do you all have anything to add to that?
No, just great job. I'm really happy with my guys and your APSL scores. Just let's make sure if there's anything pending, and there's like maybe one or two of you, let's get that out the way because the APSL is going to be its own beast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that for everyone here, I mean, what the blueprint is now, and I think that the hardest part of the year or this class so far is really done, because when we move into the APTEL, what everybody's looking for, what dispositions that you have to be able to cite and prove, how to work in APA. For a lot of folks, that was kind of something that was new to some folks. And so, what everyone expects as far as APA styling, the format of everything. And so I think moving into the APTEL, it's really just looking back and making sure you do a self-check in your grade books and the grade center, and make sure you go through your assignments and make sure you've submitted. I know for my folks, making sure everybody has gone back and put everything in the right box and assignment drop boxes and areas and taken care of those. We want to make sure that everybody's on track. But I'm really proud of the work that everybody's kind of put in and where everybody's at right now.
Agreed. Actually, before we look at the APTEL for just a minute, I do want us to look at our, under your, I think it was maybe under week 10, let's see. Under week 10 of, in your Blackboard, the very bottom thing is a competency folio example. So don't forget that you have to be putting these things in your competency folio. So this is a student that is being used as an example from a while back. And so just like under communication, notice that it's labeled Fall 2017 APSL. So notice that under communication, you need 3 evidences: an APSL, a PSYOP, and open-ended. And so what you put in here needs, like, you'll need something that demonstrates communication from the APSL, something when you have PSYOP later, and then one can be an open-ended one. So if you wanted to use one from your APTEL as open-ended, or if you wanted to use one that's from your internship, you could for your open-ended. But just make sure you're going to do one entry for all 21 each of your 3 semesters. So you'll have 3 entries in each one. So make sure that, so it's labeled, this one's labeled Fall 2017, yours would be Fall 2019, APSL. You're going to do a brief narrative, and then you're going to have your artifact attachment that will be down here, and you need to label that as well, APSL Fall 2017, or in your case, Fall 2019. Then that way we can look and see, or your coach can look and see, and know that this is what you turned in. Does that align, and does that match this attachment that's down here? And so you'll do that for each one. And if it's your digital learning competency, if it does ask for a digital learning, you would just highlight that digital learning in yellow. Then if you want to turn this into your district at the end for your digital learning renewal credits, that makes it easy for your district to see that at that point. I think that's the biggest thing, is making sure those things are labeled and that they do align with what each one is asking you to do. So like change management asks, well, it's the same ones, APSL, PSYOP, and open-ended. Conflict management, APSL, APTEL, and open-ended. So you'll see how those change, and leave your directions in there. So these directions would already be in there. So leaving that, and that you're not deleting that, because you're going to need those anybody have anything? That's just a good visual for you. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add to that?
Just make sure you're doing it.
Please don't wait till the last minute.
It will be so overwhelming for you. Just do a little bit at a time. You've already done the work for these. You're just going to be pulling these into TaskStream and putting them in this format here. And this is such an awesome example. And it's such a great way, Dr. Hamilton, for pulling this up. Just a great example for everybody to look at. I mean, it's pretty clear and cut and simple for you guys to look at. The main thing is to make sure you're staying top of it and you're not waiting until 6:02 to start throwing stuff in here, because you'll be too far behind.
You can have an artifact that goes across more than one of the strands there. So don't think you use a picture of you leading a PLC in, say, delegation. That might also fit depending on what the PLC is about, and change management as well.
That's right. And then remember, you don't put anything in where it says digital learning competencies. That is just there for you to know what they are so that you can align what you put in there with that. And then at the end of every class, at the end of every semester, every term, you will submit your internship logs. You have to have a minimum of 80 hours each term, and that does have to be signed by your site supervisor.
I would think it's a great idea for the folks that I've looked at and been a part of in coaching. That internship log needs to be typed up.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of folks put it together by hand, and you write in on a form, and then you scan it and you put it in there. It's really hard to pick up and read sometimes. And if you have multiple people looking at this, which you will over time, you need to make sure it's typed up so everybody can clearly see what you're doing. And the hours that match, and then have a signature and a date on there for your supervisor. That's really important.
Agreed. All right, so maybe we'll look a little at the AppTel to get started tonight. I'll try to split the screen here and sort of start with that. AppTel Evidence 2 is your analysis and action plan for your teacher empowerment and leadership. So you will leave this first page just like it is, and you'll just put your name in right there, and that's all you're going to do on the first page. Your name here. This is your AppTel helpful hint. So that's all you do is put your name there. Now you are going to, even though it doesn't have it in the template, you are going to insert right here above task 1. You will insert your school profile, because you're going to use the same one for all 6 evidences. So that school profile that you did for your APSL will be inserted in there as well. Then task 1, prompt 1 is the literature review for these 5 headings right here. And those headings for the literature review, this is just the literature review, so you will not be telling about your school at this point. You'll just be talking about these 5 areas. You'll have a minimum of 3 sources, which also means you have to have a reference list at the end. And you will cite those. You will have a minimum of 3 sources for each of those, so that means a minimum of 15 sources for prompt 1, task 1, prompt 1. So you will be doing that. So that's your first activity. And then your second activity is to create, and remember to follow APA. Your task 1, prompt 2, you're going to create 2 things, a checklist and a survey. The survey is what will go out to the teachers and they will complete. And the checklist will be what you will be using for your observations and your instructional rounds and things of that nature. You're not going to do that for task 1, even though you're going to want to get started pretty quickly. You won't do that for task 1, but you need to go ahead and get that done. And don't forget that you want your checklist and your survey to be able to go back and sort of align with these research items that you did in prompt 1, because in prompt 2, you will be saying, okay, this is what the research said about these things, and this is what my survey and my checklist really shows is happening in my school. Drs. Crawford and Shepherd, do you all have anything? What advice can you all give for task 1?
Well, Chelsea just asked, there's the reference list at the end, or like a bullet, and you make a normal reference list at the end of the document. And then with regard to, the creation of both your checklist and your survey, and I think we talked about this briefly last week, do not go out and make work for yourself. There's plenty of stuff out there, including copying, pasting right from the teacher work condition survey of items and documents that you can have that are already vetted, that are already deemed both valid and reliable, and won't cause you any heartache of trying to put it together, getting it vetted, and then getting it used. So please do not go out and make work for yourself. John? Yeah,
I would just echo that. You're already doing enough work. Don't go out and try to conduct a ton of research on a bunch of items that your school system and district already created and used and have vetted, and that's reliable, that is good stuff. And we're going to show you a couple of things tonight that you can use that's already posted under week 10. If your school's not already using something, we're giving you things to use. And so don't reinvent the wheel here. Make sure if you're using walkthrough forms and checklists that provide evidence of teacher empowerment and classroom leadership, then use those. Don't feel like you got to go out and create new things.
Colleen asked, is the checklist like what you use for teacher walkthrough observations? No. So be clear, you are going to come up with a document to use for walkthroughs. If your school or your district already uses one, then by all means use that one. Again, just save yourself the heartache and use something that's going to be aligned to whatever your district is going through. The checklist is going to be for documenting that what you say is happening in your building is actually happening.
Remember that these walkthroughs and things can count as a part of your internship experience. Dr. Stedman asked that you ask permission to shadow your administrator on walkthroughs if possible. And if you do conduct them independently of your administrators, please have your administrators let the teachers know that you'll be coming through, that you'll be doing these walkthroughs, and let the teachers know the purpose of you doing that, so that they're not surprised or confused, don't understand. And I know you've been using your teachers for a lot of things like PLCs and things. I'm sure they're already very familiar with what you're doing, but it's still just that respectful piece to just go ahead and make sure that the administrator lets them know too that it's okay that you're coming in and doing that.
Yeah, you're already really comfortable with a lot of your folks in your PLC. You could probably conduct a lot of walkthroughs with those classroom teachers if your PLC was constructed in that way. So feel free to make sure that you're using those folks. They're already comfortable for you. They know what you're working on. Just make sure you speak to your supervisor and make sure that's okay.
All right, so then in task 2, and that's just really a continuation of what you have created in task 1. So in task 2, for prompt 1, you're going to use the instruments that you created in task 1 to collect your data. So you're going to use your survey. And remember, you can just even pull things from the teacher's working conditions survey that will analyze the results for the teacher perception of their empowerment and leadership. You can collect data in the school over a period of 5 days. They ask for at least 3 observations. The more you have, the more valid and reliable, and the better picture you have of what's going on in your school. And you are most certainly encouraged to conduct informal interviews with teachers as well, because sometimes you can get a lot more information just sitting and talking with someone than you can asking them to fill out a survey. Once you've collected your surveys and analyzed your results and have completed your 5 days of observable practices, then you're going to again respond to these very same 5 topics that you responded to in task 1. So in task 1, you did the research. What is that? What does the research say is best practice? In task 2, you're going to, this is an important part in task 2. Let's not forget this part. In prompt 1, you're going to start by describing your data collection strategies and the criteria in the process that you went through for identifying the gaps. So don't forget that important first piece. What were your data collection strategies, and then what process did you go through to identify the gaps between what research says is best practice and what is actually happening in your school? And so then in the narrative form, you will talk about and address the gaps between research and what's happening in your school in APA formatting to the very same 5 topics that you had done your research on in task 1. Drs. Crawford and Shepherd, do you have anything to add to that?
No, so if they're,
I just
so
think,
if, go
go ahead, Dr. Crawford.
No, I was just going to say, so what you're looking at there would be, if you're trying to look at professional development in your school, you would write that you pulled up the North Carolina Teacher Work Condition Survey. You copied questions Q whatever through Q whatever. You placed those questions in a Survey Monkey. You sent that survey out to all certified staff members of the school, of which there were 65, so N equals 65. Of those 65, you got a return of 58, so whatever percentage that is. Your data then tells you that based on the survey you collected, the staff thoughts around PD is whatever the data says, and then you go into writing what that gap is and why it's important to fill.
And don't feel like your survey needs to be forever long. I mean, your survey can be concise. You can reference that North Carolina Teacher Working Condition Survey or whatever instrument they may use in South Carolina. But don't feel like you got to go create an instrument that is 40 questions long. And I think it's a great idea.
First of all, they won't do it.
Yeah, they won't do it. That's exactly right. I mean, honestly, I'm thinking anything like 8 to 10 questions is going to be pretty comprehensive.
That's more than enough.
Yeah, I think Dr. Hamilton made a really great point in the fact that you really got to make sure you identify the gaps here in narrative form right off the bat, and you got to hit home that we understand. You know what the best practices are for teacher empowerment, and you've conducted the research, and you're surveying your staff, and you're able to identify the gaps that exist in your school. And so be able to put that in narrative form is something that all the readers are going to be looking for right off the bat.
And I would say that the reason that you're doing the research on best practices before you make the checklist and surveys is so that you know what that is, so that when you do create your survey and create your checklist, then you know what you need to include in there so that you can address the gaps between best practices and what is happening. Because your survey information in your checklist is going to have to align with that information for you to be able to identify gaps.
I think that obviously this entire program is a clinical approach to school administration, which is really awesome. And I've talked about that with my students a lot. But I want you guys to realize that when you become a building level administrator, these quote tasks and prompts, there's going to be things that you do on a regular basis. You're going to take best practices. You're going to be conducting research on what your school's identified needs are, what is out there to help you provide professional development to your school. You're going to be working with other teacher leaders to identify and conduct a needs assessment on a yearly basis to make sure that you're providing for your students. And these are some of the very similar steps that you're going to take that yearly or semesterly basis, depending on what schedule you're on. It's going to be a very familiar thing to you once you become a building level administrator. So do not take these tasks lightly, because you are going to put them in practice soon enough once you get into a school building as a leader. These are all very practical, transferable skills that you're going to have. We're not asking you to conduct research on theoretical educational models and things that you're never going to use. This is not a theoretical based assignment. These are very practical clinical action research items that you're going to use. And so I would take them serious and make sure that if you're going to work in that school for any amount of time, that you help make this useful for your school. You talk to your supervisors and your administrators, and how can you use this to benefit your school, to identify what current gaps exist in your school, what best practices, how are your teachers empowering one another, what professional development is being provided, and how can you help solidify a plan, or at least identify for your supervisor, so to speak, that things that everybody can work on in the future. So I would just say it is almost a gift that you're kind of going through this in a clinical approach, because there's a lot of programs that are very theoretical based, and you kind of get out of it and you go, well, that's useless. I'm not going to use any of that. We can't say the same for this. It's very practical, and I think that Dr. Crawford and Dr. Hamilton would echo that these are things that we use on a yearly basis.
Those of you that work on the school leadership team know that you're going to have to do a comprehensive needs assessment, which is a long, tedious pain in the butt to do, but it's part of the process of InduStar. The other thing is, it is not uncommon, and I know that because I've had a couple in the last couple of months, even when you're interviewing for positions now, it is not uncommon for them to have a folder with data from the most recent teaching work condition survey, and then maybe some school level data, and they will ask you questions before you even go in to respond to a written form about what does the data tell you and how would you respond to the data. So not only when you are working in the building to get positions now, they're going to ask you to respond to that data. So Dr. Shepard is right. It's very, very practical. And the more comfortable you get with this process now, when you're in that interview room and they give you a folder and they say, here, respond to this, we'll give you 30 minutes, then you'll come in and talk to us, you'll know what to do and how to respond, and from what sources to pull from.
Also, don't miss this piece. Gaps in the 5 areas are to be addressed in the narrative form using APA and referencing your sources identified in the literature. So if you were talking about similarities and differences, and you were saying that Marzano's research says that that's one of the highest yield gains that you can have, practices that you can do, but you didn't see any of that in your building, or your teachers don't use that a lot, then you don't just say, oh, similarities and differences. You have to reference that. You would have to reference where you got that from, Marzano's 9 high yield strategies, or wherever you found that. You would have to reference that. So don't forget that anytime you put something in your work that that's someone's work, you have to reference that and give them credit for that when you're doing it. So then, and this will be probably the last part of this part we talk about tonight, is task 2. So your walkthrough data would be graphically and narratively explained in prompt 2. So that's 2 things. You'll provide narrative results of what the administration provides concerning what they see as strengths and areas of need for the walkthrough data they've collected throughout the school year. If your principal doesn't call the process a walkthrough, then whatever they call it, whether it's instructional rounds or whatever it may be that they call it. And then you're going to graphically present that data as well. You're going to show the actual results of the survey and other data during the 5 days of observation. You're going to make sure you use APA, and you're going to identify everything as figures. And you're going to provide graphic and narrative data for your personal walkthrough experiences. And so I was looking at this last night with one of you, and we were talking about, we're not sure that this would really be yes, no. We were thinking that this would probably be more like percent agreed or disagreed, or, I mean, what does everybody else think about that? Like, you're not just going to say, yes, we had similarities and differences.
Yeah, I think a Likert scale would probably best be used there instead of yes no. Yes no is, we live in the gray in education, and I think yes no is pretty black and white.
Yes, I don't see that coming together with so I think that of course this is just an example.
Yeah.
But I think someone had sent out a survey that had like strongly disagree, neutral, agree, strongly agree. So some way to sort of bring that information together that gives a better picture of, do we have evidence from our data that this is something that is happening in our school or is not happening in our school based on the observations we made or based on the survey results. Is that what you all think?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Hang on a second. Freeman asked, we're doing a walkthrough, can we create a sheet that will allow us to have an acceptable narrative? Is there one created? If so, where can we find it? So again, what you want to do is you want to have a document that allows you to collect whatever data that your school or your district is collecting. Outside of that, if you wanted to add something that will allow you to take some subjective notes, then I would make it part of the already established document. When you get into creating your own, then you're getting into making sure you don't violate the rules of statistics. You want to make sure that your document is valid and reliable, and then that in and of itself is a whole nother thing that you want to deal with. So if you have a document that they're already using, I would use that and then work to add you can add a subjective narrative piece to that document. I wouldn't try to create both at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. I think that if you're trying to create a walkthrough document or a sheet that would fit a narrative, I think that you're talking about conducting a lot of research there to make sure that it is valid and reliable, and that it is research-based and not simply an opinion.
Save the headache, man.
Yeah. That's a lot of work.
Save the headache. Yeah.
That's a class in its own right there.
It is.
Use what you already have. All right, are we good on our questions?
Think so.
Okay, great. Well, then let's just move on back to week 10 here on our sheet. And so your task 1 and your discussion board is due this Sunday night. So let's just say that, and then we'll move on with Dr. Crawford, who is going to talk to us about research-based and effective ways to build efficacy and empower teachers to become leaders inside the classroom and at building level. And Dr. Crawford, I was going to pull this up if this is something that you're going to use, perhaps.
Yeah, that'll be one of them. So again, I think the advantage of the three of us being on at the same time is that we're looking at, when you look at Dr. Shepard, Dr. Hamilton, and I, professionally, we live in very, very, very different worlds. And so the challenges that we face day in and day out are very different, and yet we all operate under many of the same auspices. Whether you're working at a high-performing high school or elementary school, or whether you're working at a low-performing elementary, middle school, or high school, the job of empowering teachers is the same. And so, one, just so you know how serious it is taken by the state, there is a whole set of its own section on the teacher working conditions survey, and all I did was pull up those questions there. Whether or not you're recognized as an educational expert, whether you're encouraged to participate in leadership roles. Teachers are effective leaders in the school. So in that particular question, they're rating not only you, but they're taking a shot at rating each other. And when you take that into totality, and then just keep scrolling down, it even talks about professional development. Now, in many cases, as an administrator, you may be hamstrung by budgetary concerns, by district priorities about, professional development. So, for instance, I'm in a Title I school, and the Title I conference has been taken off the table in Guilford County Schools. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that one, but it is what it is. I think what they told us, and I quit paying attention, but I think what they told us was they wanted PD, whether for principals or for teachers, to be a lot more specific. So while the Title I conference is not anything that's approved, maybe taking a team to NCTM, the National Council of Teachers and Mathematics Conference, because it's based specifically in content, is something that would be approved. So you got to learn to navigate that within your district. I have a Spanish immersion magnet in my building, and so I'm sending a team to a conference I had never heard of called La Cocheta out in New Mexico. It's a conference specifically for schools that have immersion programs, dual language programs, and even programs that have a high number of students of ELL students. And then down with instructional practices support. So again, folks, I didn't create any of this. I went right to the TWC, copy, pasted, boom, and put it there. And so that is what, as a school leader, again, regardless of the school you are in, that you are responsible for developing in your teachers. And I gave you a definition of what efficacy is. And we spend a lot of time talking about, teachers' efficacy, but part of what a teacher has to do is build students' efficacy. And folks, the number one job, and I don't know if Dr. Shepard or Dr. Hamilton will agree or disagree, but for me, the number one job of a principal is to put good teachers in classrooms. All else after that is secondary. And if you can do that, that's going to really do about 80% of the lifting for you. So whether you get lucky and get to hire an experienced person, or whether you've got to hire that brand new person fresh out of school, either in April or if you get lucky in December, part of what your job, folks, is to make sure that you are building your folks up. If you look at that third paragraph, I have the months of October and February in parentheses. And that is because, if you didn't know, if teachers are going to leave you, that's when they're going to do it. October, the wide-eyed, glassy-eyed, oh my God, I'm going to come in and save the world, and these children just need me, and I'm going to hug them and love them. And, by October, if you have not tempered that by saying, okay, that's great to be able to want to do, but okay, let's talk about how to get through a school year, you're going to be in trouble. And if they survive October, then you have to get through the holiday season. And, February is really bad because you wake up and it's dark. You go to work and it's dark. I'm tired or miserable. They don't like me. I don't like them. And I'm just going to take my ball and go home. So these are all types of things that you have to kind of manage through. And a bad classroom experience or negative work environment you can break a teacher's confidence. And so you've got to understand, where you are. So and I've got 3 this year, first year teachers, and I spend a good 80% of my day bouncing between all 3 classrooms, giving quick and immediate feedback, so that, I can make sure that the teachers are growing the way I want them to grow, and then growing in ways that are going to support them, down the road. Sometimes I will kind of if I see a first year teacher doing something completely ridiculous, sometimes I may let it go for a few minutes. Then I'll step in and say, okay, you see what you did here, try shifting this. And, I think that will take care of X problem. You don't want to give your folks too many things to concentrate on one, especially new teachers. Now, John Shepard comes in my building, I'm going to give him 4 or 5 things to do because he can probably handle it. If Mary Wilson there is brand new, just graduated in August, I'm going to kind of feather that. You want to give them short, quick wins, and allow them to kind of grow slowly but consistently over time. Another set of things I have there, and I'm not going to read the whole document to you, but I just list some quick strategies there about how to build that efficacy with teachers. Because, I'm not going to ask her to pull it up, but a link that I posted to mine was, if you don't know John Hattie, it's a name that you'll know or hear about shortly. He did some pretty definitive research on all the strategies that are out there that are used to improve student achievement. The number one strategy that he found in predicting student achievement was collective teacher efficacy. Let me say that again, collective teacher efficacy. There is a famous quote by Henry Ford has said that says something to the effect of, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And so when he ranks all the effect size there, and a significant effect size is considered 0.4 or better, or decimal 4 or better. So if you look at collective teacher efficacy, I mean, it's nearly 4 times a significant impact. In other words, a building full of teachers that believe they can move kids regardless of the circumstances, it's going to get done. If your conversations go, well, listen, you know, Brown, Shipman, and McFadden, and I really need for you all to dig in on these math scores because our kids are struggling. Yeah, Dr. Crawford, but. Okay, well, right off the bat, if that's how your conversations are going, then you're already halfway into negative effects for your kids. So collective teacher efficacy is the number one predictor of student achievement. And so developing individual teacher efficacy in your building, then in the case of Dr. Shepard, he's got to think in terms of his individual teachers, his departments, and then how his departments work with each other. When I was a middle school principal, I told all my teachers, regardless of what you teach, every teacher in this building here teaches reading, period. And so learning to develop that is something that will take you far. It's something that you're going to be assessed on in the teacher working condition survey, and something that will go a long way towards student achievement. Dr. Shep, Dr. Hamilton.
Yes, thank you. And then did you want to mention your charts?
Yeah, so if you go, so there's a couple, put it on the first one. Yeah, there you go. So I have 2 different charts there that will allow you to kind of take a look at, and if you get a chance to take a look at them, you'll be able to look at your teaching staff. And I'm pretty sure Dr. Shepard and Dr. Hamilton can look at this. They put their entire staff in one of these boxes. And when you talk about, there are 2 things that you're addressing. If you want to boil down efficacy, you're talking about skill, and then you're talking about the teacher's will. And so a teacher with high skill, but not a lot of confidence and not a lot of will, is somebody that you're going to have to supervise. And I'll be honest, that supervision can turn into one of 2 things. You're going to supervise them up, or in some cases, you're going to supervise them out. You will throw the kitchen sink at them if necessary, but in many cases, that's what's going to come to. Those folks with high will but not a lot of skill are people that you coach. Those people with low skills but high skills and high will, those are your superstars. Those are the folks that you want to delegate to. Now, I would caution you there. If Ashley Foster is that person, she's got it together. She's had 4 straight years of growth in the double digits. She'll take the lowest performing kid and get them 3 or 4 years above grade level. She can be a grade level chair. She can be your support. She can be the person that you send other teachers to. She can mentor 4 or 5 teachers. But you want to be careful of overwhelming those folks with too many things, because then they get lost in the mix. So you want to be careful of that. And then, of course, people with high motivation, but low skills of folks that you may need to support. And in many cases, it'll be the same thing. You want to support them up, or in some cases, you want to support them out, but it just kind of depends on where you are. The second chart there is just a little more detail. I'll let you read that one on your own, but they both largely say the same thing.
All right, thank you, Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Crawford. So along those same lines, let me get back to week 10. And there it is. I'm going to talk a little about research-based professional development for teachers with an emphasis on research of Linda Darling Hammond and some others. And so piggybacking on what Dr. Crawford was talking about with efficacy, that professional development is a way to build that collective efficacy in teachers. And that's one of the things in North Carolina on our principal evaluation instrument that we are required to do in Standard 4, and that is to improve teacher performance. And really the only way to improve teacher performance is through providing training for them and feedback, and allowing them that opportunity to learn and grow. So when you do help them learn and grow, and you do let them experience that success, and they can start feeling like they can, like Dr. Crawford said, then they will. And that's what you want, is when you have this collective group of people in your building who have that attitude of I can and I will, and they're working hard, and you are working hard as well to be able to provide feedback and support them, and then continue their growth and keep them on that excited trajectory of learning and growth. That's when you're going to get that biggest effect size that Dr. Crawford talked about from John Hattie, of that collective efficacy in your teachers. And the thing is that as the principal, you really are the person that's leading that PD, and you are the person who has to be the expert. And none of us can go to a training for one day and walk away and be an expert. Yet that is the way that we treat people in education. Oh, here, we told you how to do that, or we gave you the manual, we told you to read it, or my most least favorite thing, the trainer. I don't even know who thought of that, but that was never a good idea, never will be a good idea, to send somebody, me or whomever else, off for a day and say, oh, now you're the expert and you go back and train everyone else. Well, no, I'm not the expert. I might just know a minute more than somebody else knows, but that's just not a good process, especially when you can't go through the entire process of providing that sustained feedback, the observations, correcting misunderstandings and things of that nature. But as the principal in the building, you are the expert, and you are the one that's going in all the classrooms. You're the one that's seeing those best practices, and it's your job to make sure that you're helping to get those best practices infiltrated throughout your building. And the last couple of years, we have done guided observations in our building, and it's really been the best. My teachers will tell you it's the best PD we have. They get a half day, and under the guidance of me, my assistant principal, my coach, and then I get help from the HR department. We bring people in, we have processes that they have to follow, at what we're looking for, and I cannot tell you how it has really infiltrated like best practices throughout our building. And what else I see is that it has really increased vertical alignment in our building. I don't mean content vertical alignment as much, I mean structures and processes of vertical alignment. So like all the way from kindergarten to 5th grade, we're using circle maps with a vocabulary word in the middle and visual representations in the circle of the circle map. And children are looking at those pictures and trying to find the similarities between the pictures. And then they're creating words that they think that the word could be. And then it gets uncovered one letter at a time, especially in kindergarten where they're looking like first letter, oh, did we have anything that started with that letter? What's the sound? But we're doing that K-5, and that's a structure and a process. And I would offer to you that in addition to that, that when students go from grade to grade to grade to grade, and they have the same anchor charts, they have the same processes, then that helps them feel safe And that helps them feel secure because they don't have to go when they go from grade to grade and learn the teachers. And that helps them be more ready for learning. And so, so that's just really been a great thing for us. And also, like Dr. Crawford mentioned, we are sometimes like, where is your PD money? Well, you might not even have any PD money. So you might have to get really creative with how can you provide PD for your teachers when they need that, and you know that you have to do that to keep building them and keep moving them in that right place, that right way, so that you can build that common efficacy. And another thing is just even your common planning. If you really don't have any money, and if they do have that common planning, if you or your coach or someone could lead a true PLC with that common planning, that is certainly a great way to build camaraderie amongst them, and while you're still building their professional growth as well. This top part right here, let me see if I can get this to scroll. This first reference, Breedenson and Johansson. The research there is about the principal's main areas of impact on teacher development. The first one is the principal as an instructional leader and learner. And you are the instructional leader in your building. You are always need to be a learner. None of us ever know everything we need to know. It's just a part of the principalship. And when you're evaluating and you're getting feedback, you really have to be the master of that. On instructional practices and best instructional practices, you have the advantage of seeing these things. You need to know it, you need to learn it, because you can't give feedback to somebody and help them improve if you don't know. And you may be in a high school. I walk in a French class and I wouldn't know a thing, but I know good teaching practices. I know if the learning goals clear. I know if children are comparing and contrasting. I know if there are anchor charts. I know if they're mental models. I know if they're actively engaged in learning. So those things I do know. And so that's what you would have to make sure that you know as the instructional leader in the building. You need to create that learning environment. This authors say that there are 3 ways to create a positive learning environment: through communication, particularly verbal communication, and active listening. Principals can be supporters of PD, and this gives all those ways: financially, substitute pay, conference registration, and other non-financial ways, like maybe even just having PLCs during a common planning. And then the third way that they list to create a good learning environment is to have that positive learning environment through management. So that means hiring teachers who are learners, providing time and space for teachers to learn, providing opportunities for them to collaborate with one another, and just to have those meaningful learning experiences. And then another way that we can impact teacher development is through the design, delivery, and content of professional development. And the PD does need to be aligned to their needs, because if it's not aligned to their needs, they're not going to be interested, they're not going to be engaged with that. And then also the last one is to assess the professional development outcomes. Now, Dr. Crawford showed you in the Teachers Working Conditions Survey, there's a question on the Teachers Working Conditions Survey about do we get to do surveys to give feedback for PD? And then is that information shared with us as a staff? And that is something that's so easy to overlook as an administrator, but something that's so easy to get a good mark on that Teachers Working Conditions Survey, if you just remember to do it. And then the other one, the other research I wanted to talk a little about tonight was this Darling-Hammond research, and it's the elements of the effective professional development. And so this is why things like train the trainer and things like that don't work, or you can't just go once, sit and get, and then come back and somebody expects you to do it, because it's not going to happen. So there are 7 things there, according to this research, about the elements of effective PD. The first is that it's content focused. It focuses on teaching strategies associated with specific curriculum, content supports, and it's aligned to what the teachers need to know for their classroom. It is active learning utilizing adult learning theory. So it provides teachers with opportunities for hands-on experiences. It lets them apply, it lets them design, it lets them create, and gives them a chance to practice. It's collaboration in job-embedded context, so it supports collaboration. High-quality PD creates spaces for teachers to share ideas and collaborate in their learning, often in job-embedded context where it really has meaning. Then the fourth one is it uses models and modeling of effective practices. Curricular models and modeling of instruction provide teachers with a clear vision of what effective practice looks like. If you have never watched anybody play basketball, you can read all about it. Until you've watched someone model it, you're really not going to have a picture in your mind. The fifth one is that it provides coaching and expert support. You have to have someone who's going to go in. They're going to watch you apply what you have learned. They're going to be expert enough that they're going to be able to give you feedback on any misunderstandings or misconceptions that you may have. Number 6 is offers opportunities for feedback and reflection. So it provides built-in time for teachers to think about what they're doing, to receive input on what they're doing, and to make changes to their practice by facilitating reflection and soliciting feedback. And then the last one is of sustained duration. It provides teachers with adequate time to learn, practice, implement, and reflect upon their new strategies that facilitate changes in their practice. So those are just some frameworks in which you can look at professional development practices in your school and analyze how closely they are aligned to these features. So creating and facilitating and managing professional development is a big part of the job of a school administrator. Hopefully some of this will help you feel more confident as you start stepping into these areas and jobs as well. And you'll have this as an assistant principal. You'll be training folks right out of the gate on testing, because you'll have some kind of test at the beginning of the year. So from the get-go, you'll be doing that. So just keep these things in mind, and keep in mind that the observation piece and the providing that feedback and giving them the opportunity to be able to practice what they had misunderstandings about. All right, so now Dr. Shepherd is going to talk to us about, as a building principal, using Marzano's 9 high-yield strategies, and how those strategies as an administrator with teachers to become more, helps teachers become more effective as classroom leaders. And I'm going to pull up your document. Here we go. Oh, that's what I have right there. Do you want this one, or do you want the 9 strategies first? The 9 strategies?
Yeah, this is actually great. We're short for time. So there's another document that's called Marzano's 9 high-yield instructional strategies. That's attached in your materials under the APTL. It's very comprehensive. But this what we're looking at right now really is that boiled down into a walkthrough sheet in a lot of ways. And so this is something that Dr. Jan King and I developed for Henderson County Schools, along with Dr. Wendy Fry and some other folks. And when we walk through classrooms at North Henderson High School, and we go through and complete a comprehensive needs assessments, and when we look at our teachers and our teachers look at one another, which I'm going to speak to here in a few moments, it's really a great little tool that boils down some of these top research-based strategies from Marzano, from Hattie, and it looks at the effect size. So they're best practices. And you know, Dr. Hamilton said something really awesome earlier about, you know, it doesn't really matter what kind of classroom you walk into, what level you walk into, whether it's elementary or secondary. Good teaching is good teaching, and you know what good teaching looks like if you know what research-based learning strategies are, and you know how those are implemented in the classroom. What I speak to my teachers a whole lot about, and it's really been a mission of ours over the last 3 years, is how do we move good teaching to great teaching. And so going off of the old Collins Good to Great research and book, which is awesome if you haven't read that. It's more focused on the executive or business, but he dabbles in the 5 levels of leadership, and Collins goes into the educational realm. And so I would just, from great reading for you, great research for you, Collins Good to Great is an awesome book. And so I talk to my folks a lot about how do we move from good to great. So I'll talk about a couple things, and these are effect sizes, and these are strategies, and you guys are professional educators, and you can look at these, and I'm not going to go through it and talk about what these are or why they are high effect sizes. You can look at the research that is in a larger document that's attached in your Apple Tap materials. What I will say is, how do we take these things and help your teachers become instructional leaders, and how we help them become leaders in the classroom? Because we're empowering teachers to become leaders. It really, there's that document talk. It's really in depth there. We're talking about how we create teachers to become leaders. And I really think there's 3 avenues for them to become classroom leaders using these effect sizes. And one is an important way that Dr. Hamilton and Dr. Crawford have touched on, which is you have to create collaborative structures within your school. If you want to move from being good teaching to great teaching, and move from being a good school to a great school, I believe that you have to create collaborative structures in the classroom. You allow teachers to be empowered to improve one another and essentially replicate the greatness within your building when you allow teachers to collaborate, and you build a master schedule that allows teachers to collaborate in a natural way, in a natural setting. And so that's really one way you can take these high effect size strategies, and not everyone has to be an expert on every one of these strategies. There are folks in your building that are experts in one way, shape, or form on a multitude of these high effect strategies. What you have to figure out is how you replicate the experts in your building and spread them across your staff. And one way to make that happen is to create collaborative structures so that teachers teach one another, and so that teachers can work with one another. Now, there's a lot of dispositions that have to take place on your staff, and that have to be instilled, capacity that has to be built in your staff in order for that to take place. One thing is that your teachers have to become very reflective. And so you have to build the capacity within your staff for your teachers to become very reflective if they're going to also become very collaborative. Teachers have to be able to realize that they're not experts at everything, but they need to listen to folks on their staff. They need to listen to administrators so that they can have folks share their expertise with them, so that their capacity, their foundation can be built up, so that they can become great learners and implement these strategies in their classrooms. When you become reflective, you realize a couple things. One, that you have a lot of areas of need in your own professional practice. You also hopefully realize, with the help of your administrators, that you're also really good or even great at some things. And it's up to the great administrator to show you that you need to share those things with the rest of the folks on your staff. And how do you become a teacher leader? And how do you move your PLC or your department or your entire school from good to great by sharing some of those great things? So it's twofold: realizing that you have things to work on, and you can garner some positive things from the practices going on in your building, and you can learn, but that also you can contribute, and you can empower your teachers to help one another by providing collaborative structure. So reflection is a big part of it. I think another big part of it is being that you're open to feedback. And this is where I believe Dr. Hamilton mentioned before, maybe creating some structures in her school where teachers are giving each other feedback. They're walking through each other's classrooms. They're identifying these strategies on their own. They understand what these strategies are and how to move from good to great. They understand what high yield research says about learning for students, regardless of their background or ability. And they are able to take some feedback from other teachers, and in hand themselves take feedback so that they can grow. So I think a couple things you hit on there for empowering teachers to use these strategies to become leaders is that you want to build collaborative structures. I think that you want to build capacity with your staff to become very reflective about their areas of need, and their strengths and being able to replicate that across your staff. And I think that you want to be able to build within your staff observations, walkthroughs with one another, and also so that they are comfortable with giving each other feedback and listening to one another, which means you got to check your ego at the door, because we're all in it for our kids. We're all in it for the learning of our students. So check your ego at the door. And so those are some ways that you can build in strategies and take these strategies to build empowerment in your staff.
Thank you. That was great. So we've been over the APTEL. Please finish up your APSL. We have gone over some things tonight that we hope will help you with your process with the APTEL, and also help you just be a better leader when you become a leader. You do have a coaching session Thursday night at 7 o'clock. I think that Dr. Stedman will be sending out the link for that. Dr. Shepherd and Dr. Crawford, would you two like to have the benediction this evening?
I would just tell folks that you know how these documents and the tasks are supposed to go now. You know the format, you know APA, you know the template, you know the materials, you know the game. So really finish this semester out strong. You're over the halfway point, and you've done a lot of the hard work already. And so I think that you guys are on the right track, and we're here to support you guys and help you through it. Make sure you take the feedback that everyone's given you the first time and apply those the first time. And so it's important that you look at that feedback and make corrections necessary so that you just don't get behind. You know, the key here is that you don't get behind and you finish on time.
No, really proud of you guys. Like I said, almost there. And let's just go ahead, dig in, finish strong. Before you know it, you'll be wrapping Christmas presents and banging your head against the steering wheel, but the next Christmas song.
All right. Thank you all for everything. And I've enjoyed our collaborative time this evening. And I will send out the link to the video. And thank you all for choosing Gardner Webb and for working with us. And we look forward to seeing you again very soon.
Reach out if you need us, and see you Thursday.
See you Thursday.